Hey everybody, Josh Stewartson of World Alternative Media here, and of course I'm joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And a whole bunch of historic Bilderberg documents were recently leaked. It's incredible stuff. We've been talking about the Bilderberg Group for so long. I know I've been looking into and researching the Bilderberg Group for many, many years now, since I was a kid. And there is a wealth of information here that conflicts so many of the answers Bilderberg members have given us in the past regarding what actually goes on there. Now, we can go back many years and say to the 90s when Bilderberg members claimed that the group didn't even exist, which is suspicious at best. When we find out that it does exist, they say, oh, well, nothing goes on there. We basically talk about the Russians. Now, this information has all been leaked to publicintelligence.net/Bilderberg-archive. Now, I really encourage people to look into these documents, but I did some due diligence. I read hundreds of pages of this globalist crap so that I can bring you guys a good report, because this is very brand new stuff, and no one's really gone into it and dug into it too much and exposed what they have been talking about. And I can guarantee you, first of all, that globalism is basically the main point that people in these meetings make. The top dignitaries in the world, royal family, bankers, politicians, every person that can be considered a globalist has some influence through the Bilderberg Group. So a lot of these documents, they were leaked from 1954 to June 2002 with the Bilderberg meeting in Chantilly, Virginia. And I read from 1989 to 2002. I also looked at 1972 a bit. But I'm going to talk about the most important points here and their link to the European Union, which we know Britain has just voted to leave the European Union, and Brexit passed, and of course this is historic. But to get a bit of an insight into what exactly the European Union is, we have to look at the whole point of the European Union in the first place, to establish a global government and monetary union. And that much is clear from the documents I've looked into. So let's get into this. First of all, before I go right into the documents, I'll bring you back to 2013 when I talked to Bush's former speechwriter, David Frum, who was a Bilderberg member, a guest of Conrad Black's, I believe, twice in the 90s. And he claimed that the EU and Euro was formed at Bilderberg. Now, I also spoke with, in December 2014, Conrad Black, who is notorious as Lord Conrad Black, the guy who went to jail for many years. He was kind of a fall guy for his dealings with people's pensions, basically a fraudster. But he was on the steering commission of the Bilderberg Group from 1981 onward and had a lot of say in what happened at the Bilderberg Group. Obviously, the guy's very powerful. Well, I asked Conrad Black about about the European Union and the Euro being formed at Bilderberg, and he said this.
It exists, but I went for 20 years. Yeah. Nothing really important ever happens there. It's just people talking about it.
Well, David Frum told me that the European Union was founded there. Was he saying that
No, some of the people who founded it happened to go to it, but it wasn't founded there. David came as my guest a couple of times.
Okay, so is David Frum incorrect then?
I'm sorry?
Is David Frum incorrect in what he told us?
I don't believe the European Union was founded there. It was
But
founded in the normal places.
Talked about maybe? Conversed about there
likely
by the people who would have been able to
they
help.
talk about stuff like that.
Like world government or world economies?
No.
Different
members have
wars.
said
There were
that.
always only two issues.
Yeah.
What is the best answer to current economic problems, and how do we deal with the Russians? That's all. It was never more sinister than.
So, as you could see, he claims that the EU isn't something that they really went into much. They loosely talked about it, but they had no real control over what was going on. That they mostly only talked about Russians. They didn't talk about creating a world currency. They didn't talk about any of that kind of stuff. However, like I said, I did the due diligence. I searched through this documentation. I'll give you some examples of how he is a liar, and he is just one of the globalist scum puppets that are part of this massive global system, which is pushing us into debt enslavement, which is pushing us into servitude to a world government and a world monetary union in order to benefit few And those few are not us, good folks. So let's go into this, starting with the 1989 conference. Now, checking out page 20, it was titled The Long-Term Economic Design for the EC, European Sovereignty. Now, the EC was basically the building blocks of the European Union. Britain joined, I believe, in 1973, in January 1973. But what they said in this 1989 conference in the leaked documents, and I quote, "In the context of discussions about Europe and where it is going, one sometimes hears the expression of European Union as being a goal." They went on to say, "We had formed an entirely new structure which cannot be compared with any other regional grouping in any part of the world that has existed before or has come into existence since. The difference between what the community is and what it aspires to be is related to the fact that it is in its essence supranational rather than intergovernmental. It is not merely a matter of ongoing agreements between sovereign independent states, but it also necessarily involves the institutions of the community playing an independent, autonomous role in developing a new type of economic space with important political implications." Now it goes on to say, what are the implications of 1992, which, by the way, they mentioned 1992 several times in these documents. I'll go into that soon. What are the implications of 1992 in terms of economic sovereignty? First, by the adoption of the Single European Act in 1986 and the agreement of all of the governments of the community that we should have, in a defined list of economic measures, majority voting, as opposed to unanimity. Everyone agreed to reduce their own sovereignty. They did this by accepting that they could not stop something simply by voting against it. And now that they kind of went into that the Treaty of Rome should have been fulfilled long ago, which was a talking point that came up a lot because the Treaty of Rome was basically the first building block going back to, I believe, 1954, interestingly enough, right around the first meeting. And now they went on to, and I quote, "Such areas as merger policies and regulation of sectors like air transport or telecommunications will also be affected." They also went on to say, "The effectiveness of certain economic functions at the national level is reduced by market integration. This means enormous changes in the balance of administrative and political power within the European community. The option of an inward-looking community does not exist. The integration of the world economy through technology and communication, supplemented by the integration of industrial society through investment across oceans, is such that the idea of a fortress Europe simply does not hold water." Now, as I said, they really went into the year 1992. Again, this is from 1989. And 1992 was a year that the Maastricht Treaty was signed, massively expanding the EU. They went on in page 26, they went on and the title was Greater Political and Monetary Union of Europe, European Sovereignty. Again, they're playing with Europe's sovereignty. So it said, and I quote, "The Delors Committee took on the responsibility of studying and proposing concrete steps toward the objective of a progressive realization of monetary union of the member states of the EC. Such a union is desirable because it will enable us to take advantage of all the potential of the single market, to deal with uncertainties of rates and exchange, and to reduce costs." Now, nice. They also went on to say, "Monetary union implies that the inflation levels in the various countries must be practically the same, or the fixed rate of exchange cannot be maintained. With similar levels of inflation and free movement of capital, interest rates will also be the same." Okay. In this first stage, the committee advises that a new treaty be prepared and negotiated to enable all the member governments to give their sovereignty in the field of monetary policy, which the existing legislation does not do. The report also talks about the eventual creation of a European Monetary Fund. The second stage starts when the new treaty enters into force and a European system of central banks is created according to the model of the U.S. system, so the fiat money empire. They went on to say, oh, go ahead.
Can I just interrupt? They're actually the private central banking system that they have in the United States.
Yeah, exactly. And going on, they said this would dictate the limits of budgetary deficits and their finance. financing. But the responsibility would lie with the national authorities. The third stage would start when the exchange rates are irreversibly fixed and the ECU is adopted as the single currency in place of the national currencies. Now, going on, monetary sovereignty is already very much reduced and will be even more in 1990 with the free movement of capital. The Bundesbank is the only bank with monetary sovereignty in Europe, and it is better to share it with others in a more collective system of decision making. That word is a key word, folks. Collective. Now, moving on to the 1990 conference. I didn't take as many quotes out because it was almost a polar. It was exact quotations almost from the 1990 or 1989 conference. It was very similar. So I'll just say for sourcing, check page 11 where they have a whole piece called a new European order. Page 24, which talks about European unification, the EC. Page 26, the Pan-European order and system, not Pan-American yet, thank God. But it's coming, folks. And New World Order is on your doorstep. Now, going to 1991, which was a very important conference, you can go to page 35, where, and I quote, "The Americans also need the Europeans. Luckily enough, the Americans are now really the only remaining superpower. There can be no world order without a world power which firmly commits itself to that international order. But the United States alone cannot do the job forever. They need the Europeans. They need this other power center. And they need also more responsibility taken by the Japanese."
Josh, just that word power center just gave me goosebumps.
Oh, I know.
Because I know from this, I work with G. Edward Griffin every day, and we studied this, and we actually used the structure that they are using against us, which has the power. You take over power centers, and then you manipulate it your way.
These are master manipulators for sure. Now, page 40 goes on to talk about creating a single currency. Now, and I quote, "The third element is the monetary integration. We have made enormous progress, and are very close to a monetary union amongst a group of countries in Europe, where changes in exchange rates for the foreseeable future are not envisaged. This is very close to a monetary union. This group of currencies is becoming larger and larger in a fixed exchange rate system, starting with those who had narrow margins amongst their currencies from the beginning." And in further on in this conference, there's one gentleman who was not named who went on to recite an entire poem on the creation of a single currency, and it was a very cryptic poem. I'll show it up on the screen right here.
Very philosophical, Josh?
Oh yeah, totally. All about controlling us. Now, going on to the 1992 conference, check out page 20, where they talk about creating a single currency once again. Go figure. Now they say, and I quote, "Turning to the EC, Maastricht is a very important step in our future economic development. A single European currency is a logical consequence of a single economic area. It is necessary to reinforce the single market. The EC has to find a way to achieve the goal of enlarging and deepening that go beyond meeting the criteria of convergence and extend to fiscal policies and decision-making structures. An increased informed public debate is needed to prepare populations to gradually accept the idea of giving up national sovereignty." So basically they're talking about gradually brainwashing people into just giving up their sovereignty, which of course we've seen happen, and only with Brexit have we seen any differing from that point of view, where I'm quite surprised about it. We will do a report on Brexit soon and do an update because of course something very unpredictable happened, as you well know. Now, going forward, on page 27, they went on to say, "It is hoped that the implementation of this single currency will be in place at some point between 1997 and 1999, which we know actually happened. The euro from 1999 to 2002 grew exponentially, and I know back in 2002 they actually released the full paper money and coinage for the euro across all of Europe, and almost all of Europe took on this new currency, not money, currency. It's paper, it's it's worthless. Let's go on. Now, the conference was followed by most EU member states adopting the euro, and going into 1995, the 1995 conference mentions the EU 18 times in the report. On page 8, they talked about creating one common militarized system with the EU and NATO, which of course we've seen going forward. Page 25 and 26 talks about should the European Union integrate further and why. Now, it talks about the growing the European Union and, most importantly, creating a proper European monetary system using the same regulatory controls. They went on to say, and I quote, "Unanimous voting does not work. We must have majority voting in the European Union if we are to have efficient decision-making. In a monetary union, central banks can only coordinate policy by majority rule, and monetary union is the key to further integration." Now, they went on to say, monetary union is a key issue, which is why it is so controversial in the United Kingdom, I'd say. If a union is established, the UK will join, and this will change Britain's attitude towards the EU. The Act of Union of 1707 joined England with Scotland. It is hard to believe that at the end of the 20th century, we will not be able to join Britain with Europe. And we saw how that happened, and we saw how that fell. Now, going into the 2002 conference, now I find this one very important. Now, this was the last document that was leaked. No documents from the Bilderberg Group since 2002 have been leaked. I don't have an answer for that. I would suppose that someone has been building up these documents for several years from different Bilderberg members, because unless a steering committee member gave up all these documents to be leaked, which I really doubt because they're the top globalist scum of the earth, I would say that it was probably some insider that got pieces from several different, probably lower down Bilderberg members. I feel like, and I've gone into this with Dan Dix of Press for Truth, of course, where he talks about how he believes most of the decision making probably happens at the bar, outside of the actual conference, where the young guys talk to the old powerful guys. And of course, before I go on to 2002, I wanted to make a quick mention. You guys can find more work on Bilderberg on these leaked documents from Press for Truth, We Are Change, and The Guardian with Charlie Skelton soon. They haven't released anything yet, but I'm sure there's going to be an abundance of information that they find too. It's hard to put our minds into all these documents because there's so much globalist garbage in this stuff that it just takes, it took me 10 hours to get this amount of information. It's not easy. So I have a lot of praise, and I commend the guys at We Are Change, Press for Truth, and even The Guardian at digging through this information, because it wasn't fun, folks. Now, going on to the 2002 conference. They went on to talk about euro coins and banknotes being entered into circulation. Page 14 to 15, they quote, and I quote, "The introduction of the euro has gone remarkably smoothly. Now it is about to expand to include 30 countries and 500 million people." They went on to say, "The friction pervades transatlantic economics and politics. The two regions have a different attitude to merger policy. The EU looks askance at bigness per se, while America is concerned with competition. Both sides are to blame for the growing trade tensions. The EU for its resistance to genetically modified foods, and America for a series of terrible decisions on lumber, steel, textiles, and agricultural subsidies." Now, they go on to say, "The aftermath of September 11th provided an opportunity to glue the alliance tighter together. There has been a good deal of real cooperation, but America did too little to involve Europe in the war, despite the first ever invocation of NATO's Article 5. The next stage of the war may be even less cooperative. This will expose long-standing differences on the best way to deal with rogue states." Rogue states, like, people who want to keep their sovereignty. And they went on to say, "One solution might be to divide responsibilities, giving a military role to the US, as it happened, and a nation-building one to Europe, as it also happened. Although the Europeans spend less on defense, they spend more on foreign aid." Several participants looked at the changing nature of the EU. A Turk said that the EU faced a fundamental choice: should it become a European-wide nation-state, Or should it become a building block of a global government? That's another keyword there, folks. And finishing off this research that I did, the last quote that I took out of the 2002 document, and of course there's more, please look into these documents yourself, was an American economist noting that the collapse of communism had removed the alliance's conceptual foundation, suggested turning the US and the EU into a sort of G2. So basically combining Europe and the United States into one, order. So that finishes off the quotations that I took from the documentation. There's so much more. I'm going to be giving myself many headaches researching this over the coming months. But I wanted to bring this to you guys because, of course, not everyone has the time to dig through all this stuff. And I'm happy to say that I do have some time on my hands to be able to look through this kind of stuff. So going into this, let's talk a bit about what we just went over here, John. What do you think of what I just read there? It's kind of hard to put words to it because it's just so insane.
I just feel like a kid in the globalist candy store. I get to pick some goodies from their crappy thoughts. And it just amazes me. Like, this just shows, like, some of the last quotes here, it becomes clearly apparent what their plans are. And what they want to do. Like, they said that they had no, implication. Or Connor Black said, that... they didn't discuss really anything about the European Union. He waved his hand at me.
Oh, we don't talk... No, we talk about Russia.
Well, you had 9 pages in a Word document of quotations about the European Union and what to do with it.
Yeah, and those were just tiny pieces. Yeah. If I quoted everything, this video would go on for... And I'm serious, about 4 or 5 hours, because there is about that amount of information on the European Union from 1989 to 2002 in the leaked Bilderberg documents.
Yeah, and also, I know that, my fellow Norwegians have been very involved in Bilderberg, like Jens Stoltenberg, the boss of Statoil and Hydro in Norway. And then, we had in 2002, I believe, around there, or 2001, we had the Norwegian finance minister attending Bilderberg. And funny enough, he sold off all of Norway's gold reserves half a year after. Pretty interesting kind of incident that happened there.
And of course, Bill Morneau here in Canada is selling off all the gold. Yes, it was a long time coming. I realize that, but the finishing blow was done under him.
But recently. I guess he, from what he saw with the Norwegian finance minister, he expected to be at Bilderberg, and of course he got invited as he wants to destroy his country. Now, also another interesting thing about Norway as well was the attendance of Siv Jensen in Bilderberg in Denmark. I forgot the exact year when that was, but she's actually now the current finance minister of Norway. Funny enough how that works. When you just show up at Bilderberg, suddenly you end up with a huge position in your local government politics, or in the big global, like Jens Stoltenberg. He was attending back in the day. Well, now he's the big head of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO.
And look at the dialogue in these leaks about talking about, we are going to do these things. Not maybe we should do these things, not like the kind of private meeting that so many people claim from the Bilderberg group that, we just sit there and we talk about ideas. We got to look at the fact that these things are on documents and then they're implemented right after. The big ones, like the reason I pulled out 1995 especially and 2002 were some of the biggest financial decisions that took place in 1995 and 2002 after the meeting. Same goes for around the Maastricht, I believe it's called,
the Maastricht Treaty
in 1992. And this area of 1989 to 2002 is incredibly important because it was one of the biggest building blocks of this global government and monetary union that they're trying to create. And it's not just saying maybe we should do these things, it's saying we are going to do these things, and then right after these things happen. This is an example of how the Bilderberg Group actually does have a say, and also a lot of what they've been talking about in the group that I didn't quote because there's so much of it and it would have taken another day to go over all of it, and I wanted to get this out as soon as possible, but they went over expanding eastward with the EU, through all the way to the Russian border, and how Russia would react to it and blah 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 blah. There's a lot of talk about Germany after the wall was taken down, and of course their allegiance to the European Union. Now, this is a great thing to bring up now because people seem to realize, or people seem to think that the Bilderberg Group is just some like, oh, it's just a private meeting. It's got incredible importance in world monetary policy, especially.
Actually, in 2002 meeting, I do believe I saw this, and it was Mario Draghi, the current finance. No, he was actually the head of some kind of, I think it was VP of Goldman Sachs in Europe at the time, and he did, of course, get Italy into the European Union the same way as they got, Greece into the European Union by fiddling with their books and putting their bad, monetary policy off the books to get them in. And well, look what he actually managed to get. Well, he, now he's the head of the European Central Bank.
Yeah, and actually you mentioned Draghi, and there's actually a few mentions of him in the Bilderberg documentation as well, going back, I believe, to the late 90s there. I'll have to touch up on that after in a further report. Of course, we will be bringing you more on this, but it's just so important to point out that these globalists, these scumbags, who, by the way, write about civil liberties and have no idea, they actually mention in the 2002 documents about civil liberties and talk about how we have to take care of the extreme right, and we have to, realize that things like the Patriot Act don't infringe on civil liberties. What a bunch of garbage! It's unbelievable. Like, the mentality. Sometimes you have to wonder: are these people really evil or are they stupid? But I think there is a really dangerous mixture of both stupidity and evil intentions. And just looking at this documentation, this conflicts with so much of what we hear from these globalist bastards that go to the Bilderberg Group that claim that they're not talking about globalism, that claim that they're only talking about how to handle Russia, and it's just like Davos. It is not like Davos.
They're just singing Kumbaya around the bonfire. That's basically what they do there.
Yeah, Kumbaya, and how can we pull the strings of the populace?
And you should not worry about it at all. It's just a little friendly little meetup of the heads of state and and big corporations, kings and queens that just go and mingle a little bit, like just a regular networking.
The most powerful people,
just like a regular networking event that I've been to for businesses and so on. There's nothing to worry about there that they're gonna collude or do anything funny or plan something. Nothing to worry about there.
The way society has come to these days, and it's really come down to this, is we are pawns serving the king and queen by falling for them. We are the sacrifices. We are what they are using in order to gain their absolute power over the world at a global level, from monetary enslavement and debt enslavement worldwide to global regulatory policy. And this all comes down to us being used as pawns, and they are looking at us like, oh, well, how can we play around with this? What can we do here? Well, these are unelected bureaucratic pieces of shit that have no say, or should have no say, over what we as individuals do, but they are coming to this meeting with absolutely no transparency and meeting over how they can control us differently and how they can control us to a more extreme global level. And this is globalism, folks. This is the New World Order that people were calling people like myself crazy for. Not me, because I was too young in the 90s, but other people in the 90s where all these first underground independent journalists were coming out about this stuff and just being called crazy. And crazy conspiracy theorists probably wears a tinfoil hat. No, these things happened. These people were right. When are you going to realize that when these people are right, what else are we right about? We've been talking about this stuff for so long, and the global powers that be don't want us to know about it and want us to divide and conquer and make us look like we're a bunch of crazy people frothing at the mouth and fighting each other.
They're the modern day feudalists, all of these guys.
Yeah.
That's all they are, and they really want to, control you because they want to have that power that the kings and queens had back in old days. And we actually still have kings and queens in Europe, which is a very stupid idea. Like, we should have grown way past that thought now with being modern and understanding technology and education. But no, the problem is they've taken over the education and they're trying to dumb people down.
Yeah, and like the stuff going back to 2002, right after 9/11, where they're talking about how to bring down Saddam in the Bilderberg documents, which I can go into further in another video. The point is, we need to stand up as individuals against these globalist scum that want to use us as pawns and kill us on the battlefield for their gain and for their control. And that's the big problem. We are facing collectivism, folks. We are looking down the barrel of a gun, and we need to push that gun away, punch that globalist in the face, and get up and stand up above them, because we should be at the top of the pyramid, not them. And we need to work as hard as possible to making sure that we are free individuals apart from this globalist cabal that wants to completely plunder our free will and our freedom. So we'll go into this further in the future. Thank you, John. This is just incredible
Very
stuff.
enjoyable, Josh. I have to thank you as well.
Just incredible information. And we'll come back to you with much more. Check us out on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter at worldalternativemedia.com. You can donate at our GoFundMe, Wham Needs Your Help, and pledge at Patreon. Check the links below, folks. And we will see you next time. This is Josh Searton, John Snyson, signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth,
Be the change.